Hi, everybody. Welcome to FNS Wrestling Podcast. Special bonus episode. Finally got around to our worst of 2021. So we came back down to the basement. We're ready to talk about this. Do you think we're going to have as many similar picks as the best of? I feel like we're branching out a little bit on this one.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
I had a quick look and it doesn't look like we agree on everything, at least, which is good. But anyways, I'm your host. Back in the basement to talk some wrestling with my co-host and teenage son, Jack. Say hello, Jack.
Hi, I burned my mouth.
You did just burn your mouth. That's what you get for being greedy and having a second hot chocolate.
I guess so.
Yeah. No, you didn't wait long enough for it to cool, but now you pay the price, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we're got
Too much of a sip.
our document together with all of our, again, you did most of the work on this, which I appreciate. I just kind of added a few things here and there. So before we get into our actual picks, I'll talk about my process a bit, and then you can say what you did. For me, for some categories, I did do a bit of research because I don't remember things very well, so I looked up some other people's lists and things. But there was a few categories where something just stood out to me, like I just remembered it because it was so bad.
Yeah, there were some categories where I struggled, but I don't usually. I go off memory because I trust myself.
And some of them jumped out at me, and some of them I had to go and look up. But I also did the majority are from NXT and AEW because those are the two promotions I watch the closest. However, there are some main roster things that I either watched because it was a pay-per-view, or if it was weekly TV, I had heard it was so bad that I went out of my way to look at some segments and stuff. So there are a few.
I wonder if there's any from 205 Live where that happened.
There are a few segments from, or a few awards for main roster, but most of it will be for me from AEW and NXT. So
I agree.
Yeah. So yeah, you probably remembered more terrible things than I did. I don't remember a lot, so I looked up a few things.
Sometimes, like I'm really like I did not remember that. Which I mean, I feel like that'll happen a lot more on this.
Yes.
Than because some things it's just bad and you remember.
Yes.
But then other things it's just bad and it's just gone, like forgettable.
And when it comes to bad wrestlers, I can generally remember the ones that I thought were really bad this year. You know what I mean? But when it gets to specifics,
especially
sometimes
when it's a lasting memory.
But anyways, I say we get right into it. We don't need to banter much today. We bantered yesterday. You guys checked out episode 78, hopefully. If you haven't, it's up there now.
I am back to trying to post on the Instagram, so go follow us on there if you want to. If not, well, that's fine,
No, you do it. I don't care if you want to. You do it.
You have to.
I'm just kidding.
We're
do it
gonna
if you want.
All in on that. Yeah, you have to.
It's all up to you. But anyways, let's get into talking about the world of wrestling from 2021 in our worst of 2021. All right, so I think like the best of you, since you did most of the work, you can do most of the driving here. So if you want to tell us the categories and the nominees, it doesn't matter to me if you want to go over your pick first or last. It's up to you because I'm going to drink coffee. Game
experience, I probably shouldn't do driving, but I will do that anyway.
Take control. Go ahead. Tell us what our first category.
I'll run through it and then you go. Because I was just talking, and then I'll go after you.
Sounds good.
So we're just gonna
get right into it.
Last time we kind of shifted around, so this time we'll just start with our AEW's worst male wrestler of the year. And now I think they're pretty good with this kind of stuff. Like I don't think there's many offenders here.
I don't think so either. It was
the ones we came up with were Anthony Ogogo because he sucked, Sting because he's old, QT Marshall because he is QT Marshall. Jake Hager because he's boring, and Paul White because that was bad even though it was one match.
Right. So for me, as I looked up and down this roster, right, because I actually went to the male roster to just see actually the female one as well after this, but they're pretty loaded with talent, right? So, I mean, Luther is, I think, at this point, objectively terrible, but
yeah, but
I
think he's like, I don't even know if he made any Dynamite appearances.
No, he doesn't.
Last time it was the Jericho.
I don't even know in
30th anniversary or whatever. I think that was last year.
Right. Like I don't even know if he was on in 2021, so he didn't qualify for me. Ogogo I didn't see enough of. Sting I'm not down on as much as you are. But my winner was on several episodes of Dynamite, and I looked this up too. Multiple pay-per-views because I'd sort of forgotten.
One for Billy Gunn or Brock Anderson.
He's not the worst in the ring, I don't think. But when I say worst wrestler, it's like overall everything to me, right? It's not just the wrestling ability. It's
for sure.
Character work, mic work, charisma, all of that, right? So this guy got a fair amount of TV time, and I find nothing that he does interesting. he definitely benefits from being friends with the right people within this company.
Indeed.
But I honestly groan whenever he appears, and we got far too much of him this year. So my worst male wrestler for AEW this year is QT Marshall.
I know he's not like a wrestler or anything, but I would like to just kind of mention Mark Henry for still sucking butt despite not actually wrestling. Like, and we don't really have a spot to put him because we didn't really do like worst announcer or anything. So I do want to put him out there.
And Paul White didn't have enough matches for me. He was involved with
one
QT,
and then one on Dark. Yeah, right. I just had to throw him in because kind of like just kind of scraping for answers here or whatever.
There wasn't a lot of terrible male wrestlers in AEW.
No, I'm literally just scrolling through the roster as like you're going through yours. Yeah, and there's not like a lot of bad ones, especially like ones that we would have seen enough of, right?
Yeah, enough time to consider them.
And for that reason, I think I'll
no
take
surprise.
Sting. Yeah,
shocker.
Pretty much all of his matches sucked, and because he's far past his prime and he's super old, I picked him because he straight up shouldn't be here. He shouldn't be wrestling. He wrestled too much on Dynamite for my liking and did well for his age, given he's like 60 something, but he wasn't good compared to anyone else. He shouldn't have been in AEW. I think QT's not great, but I think he's half decent in the ring sometimes.
He is.
A lot of the times it just felt like he dragged down Darby Allin, which is another thing for me, because Darby Allin is awesome, and he could have been doing other things this year instead of teaming with Sting. I think that kind of wastes his time. He just really does not feel like he belongs here, and he was a waste of my time as well.
Yes, I know you feel very strongly about Sting.
Mm-hmm.
I think they've handled him okay. Like, do I think he's amazing in the ring? No, but I wouldn't say he was the worst.
He's not good, but it's also just there's no one else really to really pick.
Yeah, that's a compliment to AEW. There's not a large field of bad wrestlers. But what about switching to WWE?
Switching to WWE indeed. For their worst male wrestler of the year, we have our nominees: Carrion Cross, Dexter Lumis, Tony D'Angelo, Von Wagner. I'm just off the top of my head. Also, Omos is terrible.
Yep.
And yeah, I think that's pretty much all we have. But those are like the main.
I mean, you could go Reggie or something, but again, I kind of
he's pretty minor. I would say, right? Like
Commander, whatever his name is.
Commander Aziz.
But again, I'm the guy only really watching pay-per-view, so I don't see Aziz because he's never in any. Yeah. And Omos very rarely. So I kind of focused my attention on NXT because that of WWE, that's what I watch. So a lot of the 2.0 guys are really bad at this point, but
that was like
from September on or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
So they weren't around for much of the year, and also a lot of them just lack experience, right? So I expect them to be bad. But for me, as someone who watched every minute of NXT and reviewed it on our show on Saturdays, Carrion Cross was the worst wrestler this year. And again, he may not technically...
And one of the biggest.
He may not technically be the worst wrestler, although I don't think he's very good, and I don't think you do either.
Nope.
But when you consider how prominent he was on NXT and how...
all factors, right?
Yes. How underwhelming all of his matches were. And for me, I'm a little extra annoyed because he stopped what for me was the best version of Finn Balor that we've ever had. I was loving that. It was my first time where, yes, this is fully developed Finn Balor. He's awesome now. So I think Karrion Kross wins this, and I mean, you can throw in that disaster of a stint on the main roster where they changed his character.
Right, because now we're encompassing that too. So yeah, you can totally throw that in.
And then he got released. So for me, he is the worst wrestler. We just got tired of seeing him on our television and not really contributing anything other than having a cool look.
Almost detracting from it too.
A cool look and a cool entrance that kind of, the novelty of that wore off too. So Karrion Kross.
I was going to say, even then that got stale.
You're my worst male wrestler of the year for WWE.
Yeah, it's really difficult to disagree with that.
We agree on this one.
There were quite a few stinkers in WWE this year, particularly from NXT once it went 2.0. But my pick for worst has to be Karrion Kross. He was around pretty much the whole year. He was one of my least favorite wrestlers of the year. Like, just if we're going on favorites alone, he'd probably get this. Actually, no, it'd probably be Von Wagner then. But and even worse, because he was like a top guy for a while, and he sucked. He was also kind of one of the best for them, but just that's based on accomplishments alone. But in the ring, he was so boring. A lot of his offense just didn't look impactful, didn't look effective. I was happy when he went to the main roster, and I didn't care when they ruined him. He was on top for too long, stinking up the joint. He made the main event seem pretty boring. It seemed bleak at times. There was a lot of interesting dream matches and whatnot. Like you had like Balor, Dunn, O'Reilly, Cole. Like you had all these interesting guys at the top, like Gargano. And then when he came in, it's just like he's kind of just hogging up the top, and then it like you said, got rid of Balor, and it just kind of made things boring there. And his best match was the one he wasn't really in.
Yeah, a multi-person match where he was taken out for like 5 or more minutes of it, right?
And also a not so honorable mention to Von Wagner, who is probably worse, like, even though he wasn't around as long,
right?
Which is probably why I'm not picking him.
He's got potential to take it next year.
He definitely does. If he keeps this up, he for sure does. He is just terrible at everything,
and he gets a ton of time. Like, they clearly see something in him.
Is awful at everything.
He's a very boring big man.
He's the worst.
All right, what's next?
Next, the overall male wrestler for the year, which encompasses the two we just looked at.
So between those two, I am taking Carrion Cross every time. Again, he robbed me of peak Balor. He was booked really strongly, but never delivered, I don't think, or deserved it. And like we just said, his best match was a multi-man where he was taken out for a chunk of it. The best parts were when he wasn't involved. So for me, it was just too much of him, and nothing he did was of interest to me. So it's Carrion Cross.
I agree again. It's definitely Cross. He was booked like an unstoppable force and never felt right, never looked like one, never actually felt like one. He never really cut in the ring. He entered Balor's pretty good run for no reason, and then had one of the worst main roster tenures of all time, his fault or not. But he kind of had it coming because he sucks.
Right.
So it is definitely Carrion Cross for this one as
Congratulations to him.
Yep. Well, congratulations.
Not really. Congratulations.
Right.
Yeah.
Next we move on to AEW's worst female wrestler of the year, and for the nominees we have Allie, aka the Bunny, Brandy Rhodes, Abaddon, Jade Cargill, Red Velvet, Riho, and I also threw in Penelope Ford because she's not bad sometimes, but she's mostly not great.
She's not terrific, no. So for this one, Brandy Rhodes would be my honorable mention, but she doesn't really get enough time in ring to qualify. Cargill could be close as well, but she has massive potential, and I can forgive the fact that she's very new to the wrestling business.
She literally debuted this year, right? Like, I think it was like really early in the year they did the program with Shaq.
Yep. So I did a little bit of research on mine, and she seems to be on AEW almost every week, it feels like. So she meets that criteria of being very visible. It definitely feels like
she's there a lot, especially when they have, like, pretty limited stuff for the women on Dynamite. Yes. At least, like, I feel like she's one match a week. More, right? I felt like she was there a lot even before Rampage came in.
Yep. She's still not good in the ring despite an immense amount of experience. Her recent tag team hardcore match was fantastic, so that almost saved her from winning the award, but not quite. So my winner of the worst wrestler for AEW females was the Bunny.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to agree again. She was one of the worst offenders in the AEW's women's division, which has received flack for not being booked the great, but I think generally, like, the talent pool is solid.
Yep.
But she's definitely one of the worst. She got way more TV time than she probably deserved, and that was even before Rampage came around. Her tag partner Ford isn't great either, but she's better than Bunny usually. So she's only gonna get a mention here. Bunny's not very good. She got too much TV time for sure. It looks even worse when you find out how long she's been wrestling for. What you said, 2005 or something?
Yep.
But yeah, so she definitely gets it, but honorable mentions to Brandy Rhodes for sucking at everything and also just being annoying, but she hardly did anything, and Penelope Ford for not being great sometimes, but managing to suck less than Bunny.
Right.
Next we move to WWE's worst female wrestler of the year. So we got more nominees here.
For sure.
So we got B-Fab of Hit Row, Elektra Lopez. I also wrote any member of Toxic Attraction.
Pick one.
You can literally pick any of them or all of them because they all suck. Shotzi Blackheart, Toni Storm, Cora Jade, definitely Cora Jade, and Nia Jax.
Yes. So for me, again, kind of sticking with NXT because it's what I watch the most, but B-Fab was absolutely terrible in the ring, and if she had had a few more matches under her belt, she would win hands down because she was, like, shockingly awful. Even though her character and her speaking were pretty good in ring, she was a disaster, but she's not getting it. So I did some research because, again, I keep saying some of these people didn't get a ton of matches or weren't around a lot in 2.0, but even though this woman came about in the 2.0 era.
She came, I think, like, just before, because I know she was in the Women's Dusty Cup, so she's actually been around most of the year, but I don't think she really did much until 2.0.
In between 2.0 and 205 Live, she's had about a dozen matches, including some wins over established talent, so for me, she qualifies.
Frankie Monet. Mm-hmm.
Right. Nothing this performer does looks believable at this point, and I generally laugh out loud at least a couple times in her matches.
You indeed do that.
So she's super young. I can forgive it to a certain degree, and she may end up being really good, but at this point...
I highly doubt that.
Because I forgave Jade Cargill for that, but I think Cora Jade is significantly worse. And
I think Cargill's got her, like, bright spots sometimes,
yes.
Right? I think she's, like, not great... like generally, but I think sometimes she's
whereas
solid.
Jade, everything she does looks like it needs work.
I can't stand her.
So Cora Jade is my worst female wrestler in WWE this year.
I kind of forgot about Cora Jade for some reason, but so honorable mention her, and also B-Fab for being almost as bad in only a few matches. But I think she was generally good valet and hit row as well, and since we're encompassing all things, I think that also kind of saves her a bit, right?
Right.
Before she started wrestling, I thought she was great in that role, right?
Right.
So I think that kind of helps her a bit. And I don't know, I went with Shotzi again. But
what a
I'm
shock.
almost positive I picked last year as well. She's just consistently like the worst they had in the ring, where I think she was around in NXT probably more than Cora Jade was. And she was in a pretty prominent spot most of the time. Her character and promo work never improved since that first initial promo. Like, I feel like we got glimmers of improvement, but then it was just back down to the drawing board. And it was just always aggravating, and just her matches, I just can't. It's so bad. I'm glad she went to the main roster, so I didn't have to deal with her anymore, but now we've expanded the category, so that does not take her out of consideration. As she also had that crap dysfunctional partners thing with Sasha Banks before Survivor Series, which was lame.
Can they coexist?
Right, and she's just an all-around crap fest, and she rolled up to Dakota Kai to take the tag titles off of them in less than a day for their reign, so that is unforgivable as well. So I'm gonna take Shotzi.
You'll probably take her every year she's in WWE. She's going to be
continues sucking, although
she's going to be a worst of Hall of Famer.
I might not have to see her much anymore, so maybe not. I mean, that's possible. I wouldn't keep that out of the question.
I know you wouldn't. So next?
Next we have our overall female wrestler of the year, just the considerations from the other two.
So for me, it's going to be Bunny. I can somewhat forgive Cora Jade, like I said, for being, I think she's 20 years old and quite inexperienced. But as you said, I looked it up. Bunny started training at 18 years old and debuted in 2005 in Oshawa, Good Canadian Girl, which hurts me even more to give her this award. But she still looks really awkward in the ring. She is my worst female wrestler. Again, a lot because she gets so much time, and I don't think she's good. So that's what qualifies her. She wins for me. She's
definitely not good. I'm actually going to agree with that. I'll take Bunny over Shotzi. And because I think they're both equally bad. They both suck. But Bunny is, like, so much more experienced. Like, she should be better than Shotzi,
you would think, right?
It should at least be, like, very noticeable.
Right.
And she's just not. So I kind of have to put her at the worst.
Fair enough.
Next, we move to AEW's worst tag team of the year, which is kind of an interesting one, given how great they are in the tag team division.
That's why I struggled a bit with this one.
Yeah, I did a bit, too. I was flip-flopping a lot. We only have a few ones. We have Gun Club, Bear Country, I guess.
Yeah.
Private Party, because they used to be good, but it slipped, and Bunny and Penelope Ford, because they're still tag team, just female.
Right, so I didn't find this one easy because I think the tag team division is really strong in AEW. It's one of their strong
suits, for sure.
So my recipient of this award did not have many matches on TV or pay-per-view, mostly dark and stuff, but they were in a pay-per-view. I looked it up, they had one, but I still had to take them sort of by default, I guess. I don't really get their gimmick. Are they bears? Is their name Bear? Like, I don't understand. They don't stand out to me in any capacity.
Are they from like an area with a lot of bears?
They had a decent match this past week, but they just look like a couple of indie big men to me who have no real charisma or character or anything.
Bear Boulder's really slow.
I just don't get them. So they are, yes, it is Bear Country for me. They're my AEW worst tag team this year.
Bear County.
Bear County.
I was like this close to picking Bear County. I was like so close. I really was. I even had them written down at one point, but they were in very, very close contention with the Gun Club. And then I looked at our worst AEW match of the year, and I noticed how many times Gun Club are in there, considering they're not very prominent. They're in there like at least like 3 times, and they're not super prominent.
Right.
And so I picked Gun Club. They're just all around awful. They're some of the most boring baby faces on the roster. And they had nothing to them. And then they turned heel on Paul White of all people, because yeah, that matters. And somehow became like almost less interesting. I'm not sure, because none of them seem like heels really. Billy Gunn's old and just a washed up Attitude Era star, a tag team star from the Attitude Era more or less. And both of his kids are not talented either. They have to get my pick for the worst because the more I think about it, the more I think they suck. And again, an honorable mention to Bear County for being in oh-so-close second place.
Nice.
Next, we move to this should be fun. WWE's worst tag team of the year.
Right.
That is fun. So first we had the Robert Stormbrain, who I kind of forgot about, which I think was Aaliyah and Jessie Kamea is both the team gone. We're considering.
Well, one's now a WWE record holder, okay? So how dare you? Aaliyah just set the record for fastest match.
Well, that's in 2022,
I don't think that'll ever be broken.
2022.
Oh, that's fair. She turned it around for 2022.
Right, exactly. Almost immediately, too.
Right.
Toxic Attraction, which would be just Jade and... Or, sorry, JC Jane.
Jane, yes.
Instead of Jade. Jane and Gigi Dolan, who I didn't think was bad initially, but that time's changed. Kyle O'Reilly and Von Wagner. Hate to have to put Kyle O'Reilly in the worst tag team of the year. That's just sad.
They were bad, though. They deserve it.
No, Josh Briggs and Brooks Jensen, Mace and T-Bar of Retribution, and I threw in at the last minute because we kind of forgot AJ Styles and Omos because Omos is just so good.
Yeah, so I can't stand Briggs and Jensen or Wagner and O'Reilly, but again, 2.0 wasn't around for that much of 2021. So I'm actually looking to the main roster for this one. And this team, I say it all the time, I don't watch the weekly shows, but when I was listening to other people recapping and read, they sounded so awful and ridiculous that I was like checking out clips and quote unquote highlights of this group as they invaded Raw and then signed contracts and whatever else. So it's retribution and pretty easily for me. So they were only around for the first few months of 2021.
Right, I think they were mainly a 2020 thing.
But they got a lot of exposure during that time. And this faction and the team specifically never had a chance the way they were booked, right? Like, you show up and vandalize and invade the company, and then they sign you to a contract.
Even then, I don't even know how long they were in 2024. Like, it feels like they got, like, maybe less than a year.
I think they were around till March, at least, on main roster.
Yeah, because I remember they turned on Ali at Fastlane on the kickoff. I think they were at least in the Performance Center era. After Empty Arena, when they had, like, the PC people as fans, that's when they debuted, I remember.
So forgiving some of the young kids from 2.0 for being young kids, and this team getting a lot of time and attention and just absolutely ridiculous. Like, it may have killed the careers of pretty much everybody involved in that. So I'm taking Retribution for my worst tag team.
I would like to give an honorable mention to basically every tag team that started in NXT 2.0. O'Reilly and Wagner's team halted all of O'Reilly's momentum.
Hey, Creed brothers are cool.
That they had given him from that feud is cool. Like, it feels like they were actually trying to do something with him, and then they just undid it. And then Von Wagner is a waste of a roster spot, to put it short.
Wow.
And Briggs and Jensen don't cut in the ring, and their gimmick sucks. And Toxic Attraction.
They're hot and they're champions, okay?
Right.
That's all you need to know.
Right.
That's it.
I would also like to give an honorable mention to Toxic Attraction for indeed being toxic, but also being the exact opposite of an attraction.
A distraction?
No, repulsive.
Oh, nice. A repulsion.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
My pick is going to end up being also from the main roster, being AJ Styles and Omos, as NXT 2.0 was only around for like the last quarter or so of 2021.
Correct.
Styles and Omos were a crap team from the start, as Omos can literally do nothing in the ring. Like, I've seen clips of his squash. It's like he picks up a guy because he's tall and then drops him.
He's really bad.
He is really bad. It was always a vehicle to get him over, too.
But he's
and
big.
Styles always felt ironically above this, get it, because he's tall.
Right.
And when the team imploded, Styles had nothing better to do but to go to NXT, of all places, to feud with Grayson Waller. Like, that just feels like, again, just underneath him. And Amanda Styles' talents could have been doing, like, so much more in 2021 when he wasn't having to get Omos over, and when I don't really feel like they did that much either. Like, I feel like
no, they didn't.
Styles is still really good, right? So he could have been doing so much more this year. They were one of the top tag teams this year, I guess, right? I mean, it was just to get a big man over, nothing else. They were hardly a real team, I would say, and that's pretty telling of the division on the main roster. And Omos sucks hard, so I'm going to pick AJ Styles and Omos.
I think that's a solid choice. I mean, AJ Styles is amazing, but the tag team was bad, and Omos is really bad.
I wouldn't even consider him much of a tag team guy to begin with, but this was certainly not the tag team to put him in.
No, I can't imagine he was super happy about it, right? Because he's getting up there in age. He doesn't have a ton more runs, and he got saddled with this guy.
Right, for like almost the whole year.
Yeah, I would say so.
So then now we go to our overall worst tag team.
So out of those two, I'm giving mine to Retribution. They got way more exposure and attention than Bear Country did. and everything Retribution did was embarrassing and like funny for all the wrong reasons. So it's Retribution for me.
I'm gonna have to pick a Gun Club. They just suck so much all around in every aspect, and they seemingly have no purpose. Again, maybe friends with the right people, and they are not interesting whatsoever. They're just not good at all. They do not belong in AEW. But one last not so honorable mention to Bear County, and they should just go back to their county.
Yes, they can.
And next we go to AEW's worst match of the year, which did sway me to pick Gun Club, so that's kind of telling.
There's a few of them, yeah.
Yeah. So first we go to the Gun Club versus Bear County from Dynamite, November 24th. That was not good. Paul Wyatt versus QT Marshall from All Out. The Inner Circle versus Men of the Year and American Top Team from Full Gear. Gun Club versus Darby Allin and Sting from Dynamite, December 2nd. Gun Club versus The Factory.
Also from Dynamite, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what date.
Yeah, we forgot to write that down. And then also from a Dynamite, or I feel like it was one of the special shows, maybe like Fighter Fest or something. Britt Baker and Rebel versus Nyla Rose and Vicky Guerrero.
Right. So Britt and Rebel versus Nyla and Vicky would be my honorable mention.
Yeah, I remember that being just...
Because everything Vicky tried to do was absolutely awful and hilarious, right? So, but my winner of this award involved two factions that I couldn't care less about, and they battled it out in what was a really basic match, and it kind of seemed pointless. And I thought at the time it was the main event, but I sort of looked it up, and I think it was the second from the main. So just...
I don't know why you'd want this to main event.
And part of what bugs me is because the roster is so stacked, right? And even with tag teams or whatever you
want. Right, and
you're
wasting TV time.
Right, there's so many other people that you could put in these spots. So for me, it was the mess that was the Factory versus the Gun Club from an episode of Dynamite.
So I'm going to give an honorable mention to that, but I will not pick it because I legitimately forgot about it. Right. I don't completely blank on things usually, but I legit forgot. Like when you picked this, I was like, that happened
it's
this year?
It's like you've suppressed this trauma that you experienced.
It must have been. I legitimately do not remember this at all. It's weird. Like I just like it sounds like something that might have happened, but I don't understand. I don't remember. And then also I would like to give an honorable mention to Paul White versus QT Marshall for sucking and bringing Paul White to wrestle, but it was at least very brief and only a one-match feud. But I'm gonna go with another Gun Club one. Just Gun Club's all over here, see, it proves my point. But I'm gonna pick them versus Sting and Darby Allin. I was really close to picking Gun Club versus Bear County because that was just the worst.
It's just like there's no reason to pay attention, right? Like nobody's going anywhere or doing anything, right. So it's just wasting time.
But that was another really short match, and it's like. It was two of the worst teams they have, or the two worst teams they have, maybe, going at it. But this one was longer, featured Billy Gunn versus Sting, which I never, ever needed to see, ever, especially not in 2021 in AEW. It was boring. I feel so bad that Darby Allin had to be involved here, and this was made worse by tagging it with the battle of the two undefeated teams, or whatever they called it. Like, these are the two undefeated teams, really. Which that hurt my soul. But this sucked. It was a rare, just trash one from AEW, and I hate it.
They rarely miss, but they do sometimes.
They do. And now let's go to WWE's worst match of the year, and this should be a fun one.
Mm-hmm.
So first we have Elektra Lopez versus B-Fab, that no DQ match from NXT 2.0, which I think was like the second episode or something. I want to say second or third episode.
It was early on for sure.
It was really early on. Dexter Lumis versus Tony D'Angelo from NXT. November 16th, The Lash Legend versus Saray from 205 Live.
I went out of my way to watch 17th. That one, remember?
Yeah. Oh, that was when Spider-Man came out. Yeah.
So bad.
Bobby Lashley versus Goldberg from SummerSlam. The women's tag team turmoil match for number one contenders for the tag titles the next night.
Right.
From Mania Night 1. Alexa Bliss versus Eva Marie. That's just awful. From SummerSlam. Randy Orton versus The Fiend from Mania Night 2. And Damian Priest versus The Miz from...
Oh, boy.
Oh, yeah. WrestleMania Backlash.
So for me, Elektra Lopez B-Fab was absolutely terrible.
Oh, my God.
It was really short, and again, two inexperienced performers. The other one was the Lash Legend and Saray, also terrible. But Lash Legend, it was like her first match, so I'm trying to be forgivable.
It was like her second match or something.
So the winner for me is a terrible match involving a lot of talent, and this is on the biggest show of the year for the biggest wrestling company in the world, so they get a huge advantage in this category. So that's why, for me, it's the women's tag team turmoil match from WrestleMania. That's my worst match of the year. They have so many talented women.
And it's like a gauntlet match, which is essentially a multi-match match.
Right. And they have so many talented women on their roster, especially in NXT at that time. But somehow this match, listen to this lineup. Carmella, Billie Kay, love her character work, bad in the ring. Liv Morgan, overrated. Dana Brooke, Mandy, and Tamina.
And Natalya. Natalya's not good either.
No, I know, but she's not as bad as the rest. But the result was about what you would expect, and I thought this was the worst match of the year, partly due to the match itself and partly due to its position and profile. It was awful on WrestleMania, so it wins for me.
Mm-hmm. Honorable mention to, again, B-Fab versus Elektra Lopez for being awful in every sense of the word. Lash Legend versus Saray for having to be heavily edited. I didn't even see that, but I don't even need to see it to know it's bad.
I saw it.
Miz versus Priest for that awful zombie crap. Just awful.
That might come up again later.
Promo. And Orton versus Wyatt for being stupid, awful, and killing one of my favorite things they had left on the main roster. But upon further viewing of the nominees and your nomination, I'm going to have to agree in picking that women's tag team turmoil match from Mania. I almost forgot about it, but this did actually trigger my memory. I did not bleep on it
I think it came up in my research, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh yeah,
and
that was
remember,
awful.
because I remember watching this and it was like bad match after bad match after bad match. Because keep in mind, these matches are like kind of... Like, sometimes they're condensed matches, but it is still multiple matches within a match. It was like
a Russian nesting doll. You know those dolls where you open it and there's a smaller one inside and a smaller one inside? Right. It was a nesting doll of a bad match, basically.
Yeah, it just kept getting, like, I don't know if it was, like, worse and worse, but it just makes it the worst offender because it was, like, multiple bad matches combined into one. It was like a collection of the main roster's worst talent, like you already covered, and that was really on display. They did what you would expect. And the winners were even a bad choice as well, Natalya and Tamina, and I am ashamed for even remembering that they won.
And then on top of it, you get them in a match again the next night, which I don't remember if it was good or not.
No,
but
it was against Nia Jax and Shayna Baszler. Shayna Baszler's the only worthwhile talent there.
True.
And what was even dumber is that that Jax and Baszler retained at Mania, but then the next SmackDown, I'm pretty sure then Natalya and Tamina won the titles. So they didn't win it at Mania, they won it on SmackDown.
I believe you.
And so overall worst match of the year.
So again, largely due to its inclusion on the biggest show of the year, I gave it to the tag team turmoil match from WrestleMania. It was barely watchable, and I went back and looked it up. It was close to a 15-minute match. So
really, with that many people?
And that was thankful it wasn't longer, I guess. But yeah, that was my worst match of the year.
That's sad that it's like that many people, that many matches, and it's like...
And it just frustrates me because they have so many talented women, and that's not them, right? You could have used so many other people in this spot. But anyways, that's the worst match for me.
I'm going to have to agree. The tag turmoil was the worst. It was on me and essentially multiple bad matches combined into one. So
that's a great point. It's like, makes it even worse because it was just like multiple... gauntlet of bad matches.
Literally, and encompassed into one.
Yep.
Next we move to the worst pay-per-view / TV special of the year. You also wrote in premium live event because that is...
So he had done the chart and we share the document. So he has worst pay-per-view TV special of the year, and then I added in brackets premium live event. How dare you?
Yeah, I mean, they only started really doing that now. I mean, you did say they kind of brought it in at the end of the year, so that's fair game.
Yep.
So the nominations are WWE Survivor Series, NXT Halloween Havoc, Fastlane, Hell in a Cell, and Extreme Rules. Notice how AEW's not on here? Did you notice?
Not at all. So yeah, for me, this one was easy because it was fairly recent, but because I pretty much not hated, but like just top to bottom almost, it was really bad. The only other one I thought about, I think, was WrestleMania Backlash, but that was mostly because of one kind of match and
but that I actually like. Because when I was watching
a
ranking of the pay-per-views, like that one wasn't actually half bad for having a crap name. It did have a crap name, to be fair.
So for me, it was easy. This came to me immediately. It was Survivor Series. There were no builds to anything, no stories behind anything. Almost everything on the pay-per-view annoyed me. The only match I liked, and I liked it quite a bit, was Becky Lynch-Charlotte, and that was the opener. And then the show kind of went off a cliff. There was...
reminiscent of Backlash 2018.
There's a battle royal and then a bunch of large team matches that were just...
I don't know why the battle royal, wasn't like a pre-show match.
I don't know either. But they were all just lazily set up, had no stakes to anything on this. It really just dragged, and it came to mind immediately when this category was brought up. So
absolutely.
It is easily Survivor Series for me.
I'm going to have to agree with Survivor Series. It was just the worst of the year. there were so many just stinkers this year. Like WWE was not great sometimes. This one was almost entirely bad. Had zero stakes to none of the crap action mattered even a bit. Charlotte vs. Becky was solid, but even then I think it was far from their best effort. And I would like to say an honorable mention to Fastlane for being bad, and once again an entirely pointless event. Like sometimes Fastlane's alright, but this year just felt completely pointless. Like I'm not
I don't even remember it.
I'm not that Burnt Fiend.
Oh right, yeah, it was bad. Burnt Fiend. Bad.
Yeah, that's all you need to say.
Right.
And I'm just gonna say I don't think anyone's really disappointed that there wasn't a Fastlane last in 2020. I can't say last year now. And also an honorable mention to Extreme Rules for not being very extreme at all, not being very interesting. There was only one Extreme Rules match, and in case anyone forgot, that had a very extreme ending with the turnbuckle malfunction. That's very extreme.
And also, you reminding me of Bray Wyatt being burned. It's also funny just thinking about how WWE has just sort of taken shots at AEW for having the women in the match getting all bloody and that's like
literally like,
and you had a guy burning alive.
Right. Well, that was kind of like I think it was end of 2020, but then like you had like a guy come back from being burned, right? Like,
but if you're saying like they're bad for having women bleeding in a match, and you have a guy being set on fire,
right?
Anyways,
yeah, it's just not a good comparison. No. But yeah, so Survivor Series is definitely the worst.
It was.
Next we move to the worst faction of the year, which encompasses everything that we watch, which has Toxic Attraction because they suck. Gun Club I've already talked about Gun Club. The Factory and American Top Team.
For me, I'm a huge fan of AEW. They're by far my favorite company and promotion and everything, but they don't do much to miss. But for me,
generally they have good factions.
American Top Team storyline, specifically when it involved the MMA fighters, was probably my least favorite thing that my favorite wrestling company has done.
At least favorite like long-term things. I feel like stuff like the Paul White was really bad, but that was like really short, right? I think American Top Team was like probably like the worst long-term-ish thing they did.
Lambert's promos were often really long and rambling. He was also speaking for two wrestlers that I don't think need someone speaking for him.
I hate how many times he like exposed the business when you just shouldn't be doing that.
Right. The MMA guys he brought in couldn't wrestle, and I question how many people actually knew who some of them were. I didn't find
and the people who like MMA probably don't like pro wrestling.
I watch a tiny bit of MMA if there's a good fight. I haven't in a long time, but I only knew a couple of these people.
I'm pretty sure none of them.
And again, they took time away from actual wrestlers who struggle to get on TV due to the size of this roster. I just couldn't stand anything involved with this. The match that came out of it wasn't very good, so for me, it's American Top Team.
I'm gonna give an honorable mention to American Top Team, but they are pretty like I think most of the year they weren't involved, and they're not like they were a faction, but not much of a wrestling faction for me. So they make it for just being bad, but I can't not pick Toxic Attraction. I can't not pick them. They were just so bad, and contrary to their name, they were extremely repulsive, and they were given too much TV time almost every week, and then all the gold way too soon. They just suck in every capacity. Their gimmick is stupid, their promos are annoying, their in-ring work is boring and just crap.
Wow.
And they brought Brandy Rhodes back in NXT for no reason when she's just awful and should not be there. They still suck, and one of the worst aspects of 2.0, they are honestly part of a turnoff for me on that show. They are just awful in every aspect,
and it compounds it because they're getting like at least two segments.
They're
most
getting
shows,
too much for how bad they are. They're one of the worst things on there. And
right,
they're the worst faction.
You are not a fan, that is for sure.
I hate them. Next we move to I thought kind of an interesting one to put in would be the worst booking decision of the year.
Mm-hmm.
So our nominees are changing NXT
that's bad
to 2.0, giving Carrion Cross the NXT title, the Zombies at WrestleMania Backlash, Becky squashing Bianca Belair, Bliss taking over the Fiend gimmick, Becky and Charlotte switching titles, and breaking up the Hurt Business.
Yeah, which they definitely did too early. But for me,
I'd also argue bringing Sting into matches.
As we all know as wrestling fans, wrestling has a rich history of stupidity, but the winner in this might be one of the worst things I can remember in wrestling ever, to be honest. So it's the zombie lumberjacks at Backlash.
We forgot to mention that it was a lumberjack match.
Right, and they easily win for me. This was awful. It was only there to promote a movie
promo,
which is another one of my
not subtle
least favorite things when WWE cross promotes stuff like this. The Miz got eaten by them, if I remember correctly.
I think Miz and Morrison.
And then showed up the next night like nothing happened, right? This is one of those things that we all experience this as wrestling fans, where you're like ashamed of being a wrestling fan.
I would probably put that and then at least the Burnt Fiend, like when that's coming in.
If somebody walks into the room that's not a wrestling fan and sees you watching this, and they're like you can't. What can you possibly say when they're like, "Why are you watching this?"
Most of the time, if people are gonna like tease me for this, I'm just like whatever. But like if someone's teasing me and then I'm watching this, I kind of have to take that.
Yes. Becky Lynch squashing Bianca Belair would probably be my runner-up because I thought that was a terrible decision.
Really stupid. It wasn't like...
And just killed Belair's momentum, right? Who was a strong champion at the time.
I don't think she's like really rebuilt a ton.
She hasn't gotten back to that level yet. She had an amazing match at WrestleMania and then gets squashed and it was all gone. So, But for me, it was the Zombie Lumberjacks.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of pretty bad ones, especially from WWE. Again, notice there's really none from AEW. Like, I did kind of mention Sting, but even then, I don't think that's, like, egregiously bad, like anything here.
Oh, you know what? It wouldn't have won for me, but you know what was a terrible booking decision? Was that 2021, the weigh-in? Cody and a Go-Go?
Yeah.
That was awful. Oh, my
God. Oh, yes. If we were doing worst segment of the year,
that was awful.
Or whenever Cody did the America promo.
That was awful, too.
That was so bad.
So AEW, there you go. Okay. They get some bad stuff, too.
The Go-Go stuff, man, that was just so bad. But for me, the worst decision has to be NXT 2.0. It did so much and it sucks so bad. It killed off what was a perfectly good show before, at times an amazing show. Sure, it wasn't fully developmental sometimes, but it was still developing some people. It was just enjoyable. But it also has now brought in countless crappy gimmicks and terrible wrestlers. It was a terrible decision from the look and aesthetic of it to the actual execution. It's just been terrible. It made me stop watching NXT. I loved that. It had some of my favorite wrestlers in the world now. No surprise, it doesn't. It also been host to some of these best feuds and matches, and it will never be that again. It has to be the worst decision because it's just really bad. It's been super bad so far, and I think it's going to be one of the long-lasting ones, right? So it's so bad.
Yeah, NXT was my favorite thing in wrestling for a long time, and now it is barely watchable. Like, I watch it because I've always watched it, and I just struggle to stop watching it because I loved it so much. But it's not a good show. It's not a fun watch right now, right? So
literally turned me off.
That is a solid choice.
Next we move to the worst storyline of the year. So we have Index, which I thankfully had kind of forgotten about, but yeah, that was just garbage. On that note, Zion Quinn and Elektra Lopez romance, pretty similar.
There's a lot of recent stuff on here, yeah.
Yep, MSK's Shaman, right. The Fiend Orton Bliss, Lambert and American Top Team, and SCU's split.
Yeah, which I thought was just out of nowhere and with no fanfare, and then it was just done and they were gone.
I mean, it did result in them versus the Bucks, which I did love.
But for me, Lambert and America's Top Team were close, but I gave this to and going main roster for this one, Bliss, Fiend, Orton stuff. So many ridiculous things happened, right? And again, this was me listening to other people review it or reading things and being like, no way, they're not like, was it black goo they were coughing up and stuff? And just, so I would actually go seek it out to see it because it sounded so awful to me, and it was. And I generally...
And then even from what we saw on pay-per-view, there was the Burnt Fiend at Mania, and then there was that crap match at... Burnt Fiend at Fastlane, and then the crap match at Mania, which just ended it.
And then the stuff with the doll and the whole... I don't know, all of it was... So I generally struggle with supernatural angles in wrestling, and this storyline was full of them. So again, even though I wasn't watching main roster, I would go and look up highlights just because I couldn't believe what I was hearing people say happened. So this was just an awful mess where I don't think anybody got anything from this, right?
No, I think it almost made Bliss worse. Orton just kind of moved on,
the Fiend
and then
is gone.
Fiend died.
Right, so Orton just sort of moved on to doing what he always does. Bliss is still kind of doing the character, and it's awful, and Fiend is gone. So yeah, that's what wins for me.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to agree, but honorable mentions to Lambert and American Top Team, and then Index, because just Index. Oh.
Index had a few moments that made me chuckle. Overall, it was bad, but there was a few things that I didn't hate about it along the way.
And if we were going with worst commentator, Beth Phoenix, I hate you. But the Fiend Orton Bliss saga was just the worst thing in a while, even though many of these other ones spanned longer than this one did. And it kind of stemmed from 2020, which is where it started, but it carried on enough to just be awful. I talked about it a bit already, but Bliss was solid before this gimmick, and she's just kind of an annoying joke of a character now. It's just really not worth anything. I would say it was dare I say it was a waste of Orton too. Like I know we don't care about him a lot, but like I think that's kind of a waste of Orton too.
Right.
Like, and also waste of Bray. It killed off the Fiend and then got rid of Bray completely, which is just still sad to me. And in that truly awful mess, I mean, again, it got rid of Bray. Like I didn't think they would do that, and it was just stupid.
They did it.
Next we move to worst feud of the year. We go Cody Rhodes versus Ogogo / The Factory. Randy Orton versus Bray Wyatt. Hey, there it is again. Drew McIntyre versus Jinder Mahal. Best Friends versus Miro and Kip Sabian. Sorry, Kip Sabian. And Paul White versus QT Marshall.
Yep, so The Factory, Cody versus The Factory is my honorable mention. It didn't win because I don't really care much about most of the talent involved there. And since I don't really watch WWE main roster, I eliminated those feuds as well because I really only saw like the culminations of things on pay-per-views and whatever I sought out. So Wyatt, Orton, along with Bliss, just got my worst storyline award, so they got their attention already. So my choice for this one boils down to the fact that 4 performers I like were involved in a lengthy, boring feud.
That means you like Kip Sabian.
A little bit. I don't think he's as talented as you do, but I don't hate him. It did nothing for anybody other than providing one entertaining arcade anarchy match. I was so disappointed. That was
good. I like
That's
that.
what I just said. It was good. I was so disappointed with Miro's debut, and for the first few months with AEW, the feud with the Best Friends was just not good. I didn't enjoy it. They argued about video games. Miro and Sabian just didn't seem to fit together.
That's fair, yeah.
It kind of dragged on forever and was just basically about video games and stuff. And it's the company that normally nails storytelling, and they're just bringing in this monster from WWE who should be amazing, and he is now. He's obviously righted the course 100%. But this was my choice for worst feud of the year because I like everybody involved to a certain degree, and I was just really disappointed in the whole thing, and it went on for quite a while, so that wins for me. Sorry, AEW.
Honorable mentions to McIntyre versus Mahal for being stupid when it had a bit of potential, and Paul White versus QT Marshall because I'm a big show wrestler in AEW. But I'm gonna further go after the Bray Wyatt Randy Orton thing because that was one of the worst things the main roster did in 2020. That's saying something. Probably one of the worst things they've done in recent memory, period. It produced a bad match segment pretty much every time it was on, although I wasn't exactly watching, but I was definitely keeping tabs on it. That's for sure. Honorable mention to the Inferno match at the tail end of 2020, which was also involved in this. And it resulted in the death and destruction of the Fiend, who had so much potential not super long ago. It wasn't really that long ago in actuality, but man, it just feels like ages ago now. And they've done so much crap to Bray. I still can't believe they actually released him too. But that Mania match just sucked. And he lost too. It just killed off any hope he had left. That guy better end up somewhere worth his time.
Yeah,
he's got a great line for this. Like, I don't know. I think he's great. And that, anyways, to focus back, that match was really not good. And also that intergendered non-match with Bliss and Orton, that Fastlane, that also had the burnt Fiend involved, was just stupid in every aspect. Everything about this feud is pretty stupid, and that's a perfect way to sum up why this earned my worst feud of the year. Even though it ended all the way back in April, it was just really, really bad, and it creates such a lasting impression of just crap.
It was bad, for sure. I think we're getting into our final one here.
Yeah, this is our final one. Perhaps one of the most interesting ones for me is overrated wrestler of the year. And to put in, like, normal words, it's like someone who sucks, but people don't think they suck.
Right, people seem to like them, and we don't, generally.
Or they get, like, too much love or attention or something like that. So our nominations are Carrion Cross, Liv Morgan, Chris Jericho, Sting, Christian Cage, Riho, L.A. Knight, Tony Storm, and I threw in Edge, because screw you, Edge.
Yeah, for this one, Riho is my honorable mention. I just don't quite understand the love that she gets.
I really don't get it.
I think she's fine in the ring to a certain degree, but I've said it a bunch, she's so tiny that I struggle to see much of her offense as being impactful. And
right? To me, she has really no personality either. Like, well, what's there? And
I mean, you could say, well, Darby Allin's a tiny man too, but he also, at the end of the day, he still weighs like 170 pounds, and he like
bolts at people.
I was just gonna say, he also moves 1,000,000 miles an hour. And that adds impact, right?
His personality and his character work is really interesting too, and I love his theme song.
So that's the other thing. Riho doesn't really cut promos or do anything, but she's only my honorable mention. My winner, it's kind of odd to choose a guy that was pretty recently released to say he's overrated, but that's what I'm doing here. because during his time in NXT, Carrion Cross was given a huge push and a dominant title run, and I was listening to podcasts where they thought he was amazing and was doing a great job and stuff. His in-ring work, I think, is mediocre at best. I
never saw enough hate for him or disdain.
With the impact of his offense just not matching his physical appearance, right? He looks like this big, strong guy, and the stuff he delivered didn't look like it really hurt. On top of that, he fairly easily ended the run of the best version of Finn Balor, who was doing a fantastic job at the time. Even Cross's entrance, which I initially loved and thought it was amazing, became just kind of there.
I remember that first one. I remember thinking that was really cool.
Incredible.
Yeah.
They gave this man everything, and he did very little with it, and made a product that I love significantly less interesting. Basically, he got a ton of attention, did nothing good with it.
Give him some credit. I think he did the best he could.
And that, for me, is the most overrated wrestler. It's Carrion Cross. He won a lot for me this year.
Honorable mentions to a lot of people. For Toni Storm for sucking, even when everyone thinks she's just so great, and it's just not there.
She's okay.
Liv Morgan's really overhyped and not there yet. And Riho for getting a lot of love, but just not cutting either. A last-minute one for Edge, too, just because he just takes up too much spots in the top. And I have to pick Cross as well, as he was just so high profile this year, and he was just so bad and boring in the ring. And his gimmick was just boring, and he just didn't really cut in promos either. He was so bad, stunk up the joint in NXT. Nobody really seemed to be talking about that fact other than us, and some people even think that he's like really good too, like you said.
Yeah,
that's just insane to me. His main wrestler run wasn't his fault, but it makes sense he sucked. He should not have gotten all he got in NXT, so he has to be my pick. That NXT title run was just wasted on him. And again, like I forgot to mention Edge, but he has to be mentioned for an old star hogging on main event spots and also wasting this year's Rumble win. I think the Rumble win's a really important thing, and they just wasted that, giving that to Edge of all people, right? Like, and I just think everyone loves him. Everyone loves that he returned. Like, that's cool and all, but I think it's a waste.
Nice. So for me, it looks like Carrion Cross was my big winner, quote unquote, of the worst of the year, because he got a few things.
I think I went hard on him, probably, and the Orton Fiend thing, which I didn't think I would, but in just reviewing, in hindsight, it just feels worse.
And if we were to say, it's hard to say, because I was going to say if we picked worst wrestling program, I would probably take Raw, but only because I hear people
I would take NXT 2.0. I would separate that from
people
NXT.
I respect review Raw every week, and they're basically
you're always
like,
listening
they just want to quit.
Yeah, I remember you're always telling me, like, every time you're always telling me about, like, oh, they couldn't, like, sit through it or something.
Right, and that's multiple podcasts I listen to are just like, I don't know how we can keep watching this sort of thing. But yeah, I guess that's going to bring us to the end of our worst of 2021
and if we
awards.
were to do worst announcers, Beth Phoenix, definitely.
Worst announcer? Probably McAfee for me. Even in the limited doses I've seen him, I can't.
Yeah.
He kills me.
Yeah, for the worst program, I think I would separate, because I feel like NXT 2.0, they've done so much to separate that from NXT, and they even changed the name a bit.
Right.
It feels so different, like NXT 2.0. It's just, and I actually had to watch some of that. So.
You did. Well, that's going to bring us to the end, I guess. We'll be back on Saturday, right, for episode 79 of our flagship show, as we call it, where we'll talk about
get a flag.
Dynamite and NXT UK and whatever else we watch in wrestling throughout the week. So we'd really love for you to come back and check that out. You can also contact us if you'd like to, fnswrestling@gmail.com, FNS_wrestling_podcast.
That is it. I'm
on
trying
Instagram.
to get that up now.
So feel free to contact us. We'll get back to you. Leave a comment in YouTube if that's where you happen to listen to us. Do us a favor, subscribe, like, share, tell somebody about us if you think we're doing good work. And other than that, I think we're going to get out of here.
I think so.
So have a great night. We'll see you back here on Saturday. And until then, take care.